and it's the middle one, and the split is right on the bend there. See that? What's up guys, thanks for tuning in to my latest video, the life of a jobbing plumber. So this intro bit, I've been keeping it short purposely because I got the impression that people didn't like listening to me waffle on. They just wanted the work, so I was keeping them short. But I was speaking to someone and they said they actually liked the part where I'm talking about how I'm feeling, how I'm getting on, what's stressing me out, having a moan about the job and that. So I'm going to do that and stick it at the end of the video. So if you want to see it, it's going to be at the end. For example, my van is proper stressing me out at the minute because it's got a fault on it. It's constantly beeping at me, various error lights. So if you know how to fix that, or if you just want to see it, that's going to be at the end of the video. So this week's video, hopefully you're going to enjoy it. I've got it was a weird job. It was an emergency call out to, was a wet carpet. But it was a leak on some pipework under a floor. It was a right tight gap, so I really struggled to do that, but that's on there. And then a follow-up to last week's little hack for the Worcester diverter valve. Back at that boiler, replacing the diverter valve, so filmed that for you. So I hope you enjoy it. As always, sponsored by Power Tool Mate. I'll leave the link to their site if you want any power tools, especially Milwaukee stuff. They do great prices on that. And Velocity Pro Gear tool bags. I've actually got myself their new open tote bag, which I'll try and get you a review on before Christmas. Their link to their site is also in the description. You can also get my full range of kit bags on there. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe my channel if you like the video. Have a great week. Okay, this job. So I got called out to it. I came about 6:30, 7 o'clock. A couple of nights ago, and the reason for the call out was this carpet was starting to get wet just here. Now I knew that the Gledhill was in this cupboard, I knew the bathroom was here, so I thought it's either going to be coming from the toilet, which is just there, or it's going to be coming from this Gledhill. So I had an initial look in the cupboard. Bearing in mind when I got here there was stuff there like wrapping paper and wallpaper and stuff. So I couldn't see these two pipes here, but I assumed it was going to be coming from this Gledhill. Either the pump was leaking, some pipe work, or, God forbid, the actual base of it. So I was expecting to see some dampness here underneath it. You can just see we've got the concrete there, but that was all bone dry. So then I was looking at the toilet thinking, having a good look behind the toilet, is it running down from the basin or the bath and then maybe going under the tiles? That was all dry. So then I'm looking at the washing machine under the kitchen cupboard, seeing if something was leaking there and tracking for under the tiles. But that was all dry. Then I had another look in here, checked under it again, and that's when I removed all the wrapping paper. Now, you can hear it. You couldn't hear it this bad when I was here the other night. But I'm going to show you now. We've got these pipes here. And you can see there's a pinhole and it's actually spraying out. That's the hot and cold supply. So we've got the cold main basically comes into this plate heat exchanger, then comes out hot. Obviously it carries on to fill this up as well. There's a tank above that fills the Gledhill, but it's on the cold main coming through. So what I've got to do now is decide, do I take a bit out of this plasterboard so I can dig around it and hopefully do the repair there, which is obviously going to be tight because I've only got this gap, or do I just bite the bullet and take a couple of tiles up so I can dig the floor there? Obviously doing that, I've got more chance of getting on the pipe and then sending a new bit through and connecting on somewhere up here. I'll have more play on it there. Or do I try and do it there so I don't have to disturb this nice tiled floor? That's what I've got to decide now. Okay, so from what I can work out, these two pipes here, they come through pretty much on the edge of this tile here. So looking at it, I might go with just taking that one big one up. But what I'm going to do, because I think if I ping this bit of skirting board off and I cut a square out of the inside of this plasterboard, it's in the cupboard, it's right down low, it don't really matter that much and it can be repaired. I might have enough room then to just cut the pipe, and then I can form a socket on the end of a piece of copper and then get my blowtorch in to solder it. Obviously it's low down, so I'm going to have to suck the water out of a wet vac. But I think I might be able to just get to that. So I think that's what I want to do, because I don't really want to mess about. These tiles, I'm probably going to break it, getting it up, and then I've got the hassle of putting it all back down. So I'm just going to try it. I know it's tight and I know it's going to be a pain, but that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to cut out a nice neat square with my multi-tool, and then I'm going to start digging with my breaker, expose it as much as I can, and then we'll have another look and see what we can see. I've got the water off at the minute. Once I've exposed it so we can see better, I'll turn the water back on and then we can have a look at where it's actually pinholed. So I've made my little hole in the wall, and then of course the stud work, 2 pieces of timber, which means I've got to cut through both of them, which is a right pain in the arse, but typical. Right, so far, cut these 2 out, and then we've got the membrane there. So I'm just going to cut that out with a Stanley knife, and then that will expose the 2 pieces of pipe as they run underneath the wall. And then what I'm going to do with my breaker is just nibble a bit out this way so I can see. And then once I've done that and we can see them properly, we'll turn the water back on, see which one of these pipes, because at the minute I couldn't tell which one was leaking. I think it's this one, but we'll double check once we can see everything. Alright guys, so I have exposed a load more. You can see there we've got 3 pipes, and it's the middle one, and the split is right on the bend there. See that? So I'm just debating, I was thinking about maybe I could put some solder in it just to get me by tonight, but what I'm going to try and do is cut it, and then I'm going to pre-form a socket on a piece of pipe and try and solder it in place. So I'll get that bit of pipe made up, and then I'll probably have to cut this, can't get both my arms at the same time, cut this here and get back onto it there. So I'm going to form a socket in the end of this pipe using my swaging tool, and then the idea behind that is there's only one joint I need to solder. Just think it'll be a better job, a bit easier. If you've watched my videos before, you know how this works, because I do this all the time. But if you've not, basically we hammer the swaging tool into the end of the pipe, and then when you take it out, we should have a nice 15mm socket on the end, which if you get your next piece of copper, slots in there, and you can solder that up, and you've got one joint, one soldered joint to join 2 lengths of copper. Put a 90 on it, and because I'm bending quite close to that socket I've formed, I've got another piece of copper in it. If you bent that without that piece of copper in, the hook will probably damage the socket. So by putting a bit of copper in, you're keeping that socket the correct shape. So done the 90 now, we can take that inside, see if it fits. Okay, so that's the piece I've just cut out. And there's the little hole there. So now I've got to try and get this cleaned up and get this cut and offered in. Right, so I've got my elbow soldered on there, and then I'll just show you that. There's my swage socket soldered up. I'll put so much solder on that because I do not want that to leak. So now we can pop the water back on, and touch wood, fingers crossed, it's all right. All right, we're done. So what I've done is offered the bit of skirting board back in. There's a tiny little hole there above it, but once they put all their stuff back in there, I mean, they use it for storage, they're not really gonna be bothered about that. I'm sure they would care more that when that door's shut, there's no leak anymore, the carpet's dried out, and I've not had to damage their kitchen floor. And just to show you that it's all up and running. Hot. cold water both live. Alright, get me home. So I've got this boiler going in high rate for a spare. And it sounds awful, like there's water in this flue or something. It keeps cutting out though because I've been doing it a little while, but when it kicks back in, listen to it. Spitting water out. Absolutely spitting it out. Definitely got some water in it. Sounds better already. Sounds better, and it's not spitting any water out either. So I don't know how the water's got into that. Whether it's not got a fall back to the boiler. Probably what it is. Right, that boiler fluid just looked at. I was doing a gas certificate and I was just running the boiler in max rate and I could hear it bubbling away. So normally when you can hear a boiler doing that, it's the condense trap's blocked, but obviously this was the flue. Now I'm just gonna, because when I put this on my Instagram story, a lot of people asked why it was doing it and how it was doing it. So ordinarily you've got your standard flue here that's got a slight fall back to the boiler that way. So when the boiler condenses and you get the sort of plumage coming out there, any droplets of water that gather on the plastic on the internal flue will drip back into the boiler. Eventually they'll make their way down into the condense trap and then go to the drain. Now, if your flue was falling this way, so away from the boiler, what would happen in this scenario is all the droplets would just drip and outside the building you just get a puddle on the floor. But because they put a plume kit on, you've got an elbow there looking up and then they had the plume kit going that way. The water can't drip and it can't fall back to the boiler because the flue's falling this way, so it's just gathered in this elbow here. So you would have just had water sitting in like that, and then obviously the exhaust from the boiler is hitting it and making it gurgle and spraying the water out. So to fix this, obviously taking the elbow off, all the water dropped out, but we need to lift this flue up to create a fall back to the boiler, and that will stop it doing that. Hope that explains it. Probably the number one question I get asked, probably number two over what laser level do I use, is what boots do I wear, and it's these steel blue boots. The style is Southern Cross. Now the reason I'm showing you is they're on sale. Tool Monster are doing like a 12 days of Christmas thing, and they've got these on offer for 99 quid, which I think is a great price. The best boots you'll ever buy, trust me. I'll leave the link to their site in the description of the video. And also they're doing the Nipex Christmas bauble, so maybe get your missus to get you one of these if you're impossible to buy for, like most guys are. Inside this, if you didn't know, I'm going to bend the lid now doing this with one hand. I've already dented it. Is a mini pair of Cobras. So if you're sick of getting socks, yeah, I've bent that. You're sick of getting socks for Christmas, that's on offer too on the 12 days of Christmas. I think that's 22 quid. So yeah, Tool Monster. I'll leave the link in the description of the video. My absolute favourite type of job is when there's a dog, and when they let the dog come out and say hello to you, because a lot of the time these days people will shut the dog away. They just assume you don't like dogs. I guess it's better safe than sorry, but I love dogs, so when they let the dog out, it's my favourite. And my second favourite is when they make you a cup of tea. So as soon as I walked in, do you want a cup of tea? Yep. Right, this one's a really simple one. It was a call out to a leak from the boiler. So it's a glowworm, or that's badged up as a British Gas one, I think, this model. But they've got some water sat in the bottom of the casing there, and it was dripping through that screw hole onto the worktop. Now, they had it serviced recently, but I was expecting it to be something like flue seal or maybe the heat exchanger sump leaking. But it was actually the condense trap. Once I'd investigated it, I found a leak where it attaches onto the bottom of the sump there. So, simple enough job. Removed the screw. The condense trap just pulls down on these. It's just sat with an O-ring holding it in. And then whip that out. You can see there, it's just that O-ring. So while I've got it off anyway, I know it's been serviced recently, but I gave it a clean. Cleaned it all out and then just basically put it back together. So we've got an O-ring on the actual trap, and as well as the one on the boiler. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you'll know that one of my favourite tools in my service bag is silicone grease. Anything on a boiler with an O-ring, I'll just bang silicone grease on it. So I've put the trap back together, greased the trap, seal, O-ring, and I'm also greasing the one on the sump, and then just pushing it back up. What I think happened when the last guy took it off, they pushed it up without any grease on and just kinked the O-ring or caught the O-ring, and that's why it was leaking. So what's the green star from last week with the no hot water issue? I'll run through it again and we'll show you the repair. So we've got the hot tap on, the boiler's fired. I've got a quick check with my hand, there's no heat going down the hot outlet. I can feel the heat going into the central heating flow. And obviously telling you that, but I can prove it by using my flue gas analyzer. Now what I've done, I've got my temperature probes, one on the hot water outlet and one on the central heating flow. This is my hot water outlet, this is the central heating flow. You can see the central heating flow is increasing in temperature. So that's telling me straight away the issues with the diverter valve, and it's letting the heat go to the radiators through the flow rather than through to the hot tap. See, the hot tap's not budged. It's just got colder because we're bringing more fresh cold water through. It's a real quick way of proving you've got an issue with your diverter valve. Okay, so I showed you the trick last week about turning the power off and on again to see if it resets. Now we're going to show you actually replacing this cartridge. So turn the power off, pull this out. Now obviously there's three things that can be wrong here. It can be the diverter valve itself, well, four things: the motor, the wiring harness, or the circuit board. So what I would normally suggest is when we turn the power back on, like so, we watch to see if it moves, which it does. So by doing that, we've proved the board's okay, the wiring harness is okay, and the motor's okay. The issue must be with the diverter valve. If this didn't move or didn't make that grinding noise on the stepper motor, then it could be the PCB, or it could be your wiring harness not sending the voltage up. It might be broken or something. Unfortunately, there's no way of checking what you're getting through this. It's 24 volt DC, but I've spoke to Ulster about this before and you can't test it. It's more than likely, if this doesn't, I'm gonna drop it in my tea, I'll catch it. If this doesn't move, it's more likely to be this than it is to be the PCB or the wiring harness. So, but yeah, unfortunately there's no way of testing it. You can test your flow gauge up there on these ones. That's 5 volts, or it'll go 0 or 5, and then when it's spinning it'll be 2.5. I've done another video on that though, but we're talking today about this. So if this doesn't move or doesn't make any noise, you're gonna want to replace this. And I said in the other video about if this does move, but you're still getting your heat go down the central heating flow instead of the hot water, you can try and just free it, moving it up and down. But as I was out to this job last week and it's done it again already, we're going to assume that inside here it's all caked up with crap and it's sticking. So we're going to drain the boiler down, take this out and replace this paddle. So I'm using my favourite bucket, the waterfalls, great shape for going under a boiler. And then on these Worcesters, as you know, put your hose onto this bit. Make sure your hose isn't pointed up because it pits everywhere. Do that, and then we'll just gently open this. There we go. So this is the replacement kit. See, there's the front part. That's your metal paddle, so that goes through there. So then when it moves up and down like that, it's got this rubber sheath that goes over the top of it all. Like that. So when it's in heating mode, it's like that, and when it's in hot water mode, it opens like that. So hose is stopped. The boiler's the highest part of the house, so I've not got to worry about any radiators above holding any water in. So it's going to remove these two screws, and then this should just wiggle out towards me carefully. It might release a bit of water. There we go. So you can see the front's come off, and the rest of it's still stuck here. So I'm just wiggling this side to side because it's obviously stuck in on the rubber. And you can see that's quite dirty. Have a look. You can just make out my finger in the surfaces there that it covers. If you can see that. So there's the new one going in. I'll give that a bit of a clean with a rag. Go in there like that. Use the new screws. 1, 2. Shut that. Hose off. And then refill the pressure. System's full, so now I'll pop the motor back in. Power on and watch it do its thing. Last thing, it does have this protective jacket that should go over it in case the flow meter at the top or anything else drips on it, because that can affect this stepper motor there. Right guys, so you're not going to believe this, but I've been living with this for the past, I want to say 3 months. I'll tell you the story while I'm driving, but I'm not going to touch my phone while I'm driving. It's going to be set up on the hands-free. I'm not going to look at it. I'm just going to drive normally when my attention's on the road. But I'm going to tell you the story, and you're going to hear this sound that has been going on for the last 3 months. So, here we go. So, you can tell I've got my seatbelt on, so the noise isn't for my seatbelt. I've got the handbrake off because obviously my van won't be moving if the handbrake was on. Now, about 3 months ago, I cleaned the front of my van out, and I cleaned it out really good on a Sunday. And I sprayed the dashboard with some detailing spray, and I cleaned it all off, and it looked really nice. And then I cleaned the back out, and my van was looking shit hot. Everything was tidy. I was really happy. Locked the van up, went out for the day. Next door neighbour rings me up and says your van radio's playing really loud. Now obviously I didn't leave my van radio playing really loud. When I left, it was off. And obviously the van was locked, so the radio should be off. The key wasn't in the ignition. When I eventually got back later on that night, the battery to the van was completely flat. And obviously because the radio had been on, couldn't even open the door with central locking, it was so flat. So I had to charge the battery. Obviously it's on modern vehicles, you have to do it a certain way, so I charged the battery, and since that happened, since the battery went flat, this van constantly beeps at me like this while I'm driving. Number one, it tells me that my oil pressure is too low and my oil level is low. I've had them both checked, they're both fine. And it also tells me that I've got the handbrake on when I've not. So it's beeping at me, telling me to take the parking brake off. Well, it's off. So I took it into VW. They said something to do with a power surge in the battery, and they need to take the whole dashboard off my van just to investigate what's up with it. And that is going to cost me, if I had to have a new control unit, you know, the display, about 1,700 quid. So my question to you, because I don't want to pay that, does anyone know what the fuck is up with my van and how I can fix it? I've tried so many different things. When you charge the battery, it says drive your van at 10 miles an hour for 5 minutes, and that should clear any fault codes. There's some unions under the passenger seat that connect to certain components. I've had that off and looked at it all, made sure it's all dry. So I don't know what it is. And the other thing is my aircon or my heater, sometimes that bit won't light up and it won't work, or it'll turn itself off. And I can't tell the blowers whether to go on my windscreen, on my feet, or out the dash. It just does what it wants to do. So I'm guessing it's water damage from the detailing spray, but I didn't drown it in it, and I've done it before. It's not like the first time I did it. So yeah, anyone got any help, because this is driving me crazy. You can't see because it's a little bit dark, but I've just done a boiler service in that garage, and the customer watched me the whole time. It's cold, the garage door was open, and he's there in his slippers and his coat, drinking his tea, just watching me. He, to be fair to him, he asked me a few questions, but the rest of it, he just watched me do the whole boiler service. Now, bearing in mind, it's Monday afternoon, it's about 4:45. Turn this torch on. That is the state of the back of my van. Safe to say, silly season is well underway, and I'm a little bit stressed. I want to go home.